Traffic going up and down, ammunition limbers, ambulances, walking wounded. They said that we were laughing and talking, eager to get at him sort of business. They said that you will laugh the other side of your ruddy phases when you get up there.
The next morning, these soldiers stumbled into their first battle, tired out, wet through, unfed, bewildered, against an enemy who had had time to draw breath, to bring up supports and throw up new barbed wire defenses. The new army men were in dense marching formation. They didn't know they were on a battlefield. They didn't know where the Germans were, or which way to go, or what to do. After a while, the exhausted, stunned regiments wavered, broke, and fled.
If you can imagine a flock of sheep lying down, sleeping in a field, they were as thick as that. Some of them were still alive, and they were crying out and begging for water and plucking at our legs as we went by. One hefty chap did grab me round both knees and held me. "Water, water," he said. But I was just going to take out the cork from my water bottle because I had a little left. But I was immediately hustled on by a man behind. Get on," he said. "We're going to get lost in no man's land. Come on, get on." So it was a case where compassion had to give way to discipline. And I had to break away from this man and run to catch up with the men in front.
60,000 British troops fell during the 3 weeks that the battle dragged on. The blame for this failure was laid at the door of Field Marshal Sir John French for keeping the reserve divisions too far back for too long. French was removed from his command, and in December his place was taken by General Sir Douglas Haig. This battle marked the end of a phase of Allied hopes, for neither in Artois beside the British nor in more distant Champagne had the French armies found their expected victory. Joffre's attack was the largest single effort of the French army since the opening months of the war. 18 divisions were assembled in Artois, 35 in Champagne, more than the whole BEF. The French were supremely confident. Joffre told his men,
"You will carry all before you. In one bound, you will break through the enemy's defenses and reach his artillery. Give him neither rest nor pause until victory is gained. Forward with a good heart to free the soil of our fatherland, and in the name of justice and liberty."
General de Castelnau prophesied,
"The guns have done their work so thoroughly that the men can go forward with their rifles at the slope."
Through the drenching autumn rains, across the muddy wastes of no man's land, towards the waiting wire, stormed the French infantry. Once again, the wire and the machine guns were the masters. A French airman observed the fate of the infantry.
Our first line of attack was still advancing when the enemy machine guns began to crackle. Their sinister tack, 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 like the sound of a sewing machine, was ploughing holes through our advancing battalions.
In Champagne, the deepest French advance was less than 2 miles. In Artois and Champagne together, the French lost nearly 200,000 men. General Joffre drew up a gloomy balance sheet.
It can thus be seen that the year 1915 was drawing to a close under conditions that brought small comfort to the Allies. Our armies had everywhere been either checked or beaten, and they needed to be reorganized before any new effort could be demanded of them. On the contrary, the enemy appeared to have succeeded in all his undertakings.
The fall of the year drew on with yet another triumph for German arms. As Joffre's guns boomed out in Champagne, their preparatory bombardment was echoed in another part of Europe. Germany and Austria together were preparing to fall upon the obstinate Serbs with crushing might. The Serbs knew what was coming and begged for Allied help. But how could they help this landlocked, isolated country in the heart of the Balkan Mountains? Only with the aid of Serbia's ally, Greece. The Greek premier, Venizelos, was agreeable. He mobilized the army and appealed for 150,000 British and French troops. The place selected for their landings was Salonika. Salonika, a seedy cosmopolitan port at the head of the Aegean Sea, was chosen by the Allies because of its good harbor, because it was only 50 miles from the Serbian frontier, and because of its railway lines leading up country. The 1st French division landed on October the 5th. But on that very day, Venizelos was dismissed by King Constantine, who declared that Greece would stay neutral. She would not honor her alliance with the Serbs. A British division, rushed from Gallipoli, followed the French. As the Allies came ashore, they looked around them with mixed and curious feelings. Their position was unenviable. It was reported,
"The German spies sit in rows on the quays at Salonika, smoking large cigars, and note down every man, horse, gun, and ton of stores landed. This is a nice way to make war."
a naval officer met some disembarking British troops with the cheerful greeting, "Well, your war's over. In 2 days you'll have been disarmed and interned by the Greeks." It was not quite so bad as that, but it was an uneasy situation which made effective help for Serbia well nigh impossible. And the Serbs were in sore need of help. On October the 6th, the Austro-German offensive began across the Danube and the Sava. On October the 9th, they entered Belgrade, this time for good. 2 days later, without any declaration of war, the Bulgarians struck in at the flank of the Serbian armies from the east. Bulgaria was drawn into the war by greed for Serbian territory and by hatred born in the Balkan Wars. All the savagery of those bitter conflicts was revived as her army advanced. No quarter was asked and none was given to soldier or peasant alike in this savage conflict, fraught with tribal hate. The Serbs had no chance. Down towards the frontier of Albania, the remnants of a proud army trudged, out of the dust and mud of the central plain into the barren, rocky hills. An English naval officer from Belgrade watched their retreat.
Here was no orderly march of troops. They crawled at snail's pace, staggering, bent to the ground, supporting themselves on sticks. Many were without cap or boots, and their clothes hung on them in rags. Some who were too weak to walk alone were helped along by friends. Many were dying of sheer hunger, exposure, fatigue, and the last stages of dysentery. Here and there was a huddled heap upon the ground, the body of some lad too weak to walk further, who'd turned aside to die. The haunting thing was that their faces were all exactly alike. Starvation had reduced them all to the same mask of pain.
The Serbian retreat was more than the retreat of an army, it was the flight of a people. Through the inhospitable mountains, the Serbian cavalry dragged on. Oh, pray that your flight be not in winter. Seldom had Christ's words seemed more appropriate. O people who bow down to see the miracle of Calvary, the bitter and the glorious, bow down and pray for us. Sue for them and all of us who the world over suffer thus, who have scarce time for prayer indeed, who only march and die and bleed. By the end of 1915, 1/6 of Serbia's entire population would be dead. 100,000 men out of 400,000 were all that remained of her army to reach the sea and safety. And all that their allies could do for them was to take them off and give them a haven on the Isle of Corfu. The fall of Serbia symbolized the wreck of a year in which much hope had died. It was clear to the Allies that the war would never be won this way. On December the 6th, General Joffre convened an Allied conference at Chantilly.
It was agreed that a decisive result should be sought through coordinated offensives on 3 fronts: Russian, Franco-British, and Italian. These offensives were to be launched simultaneously to prevent the enemy from moving his reserves from one front to another. This conference marks a vital date in the history of the conduct of the war.
So a bleak year ended with hope revived.